You're listening to Eating for Eden, episode 48. When it comes to doing something about climate change, your food choices matter. Thanks for tuning in to Eating for Eden, a podcast that takes a food-first approach to climate action. I'm your host, Jessica J. Schroeder, and I am passionate about food that tastes good and does good. I'll guide you with practical tips and help you thoroughly enjoy your food along the way. As we've discussed numerous times here on the podcast, eating in a way that is healthy for the planet means eating less of the largest emitters, which are predominantly animal-based foods. This means eating primarily plant foods instead. Something we haven't touched on very much yet, however, is the relationship between eating plant-based and weight loss. In addition to the terrific environmental impact of eating a variety of whole and minimally processed plant foods, it can also be a sustainable way to achieve and maintain a healthy body weight. While eating plant-based doesn't guarantee weight loss, it can be a delicious and less restrictive way to achieve and maintain it. For reasons we'll get into, rather than operating out of scarcity or deprivation, it enables abundance, diversity, and delight. And quick caveat here at the top, I'm not a healthcare professional. This is not medical advice, but I do want to help curious listeners understand that eating plant-based, especially when emphasizing whole and minimally processed foods, is an approach you might consider if weight loss is a goal of yours. In this episode, we'll explore some of the reasons why many people have been able to achieve and maintain weight loss by eating plant-based. Keep in mind that everyone's journey and health are unique, so there is no one-size-fits-all approach to weight loss. Yet, we'll consider some positive aspects of plant-based eating that promotes achieving and maintaining a healthy weight that you might be interested to try for yourself or recommend to others. Now, while some people may need to, quote, go on a diet for a particular health reason, say the DASH diet to reduce hypertension or blood pressure, by and large, I am against, quote, dieting. Even though people may see results from going on a diet, all too often such interventions are somewhat extreme and are not sustainable, nor are they really designed to be sustainable. What typically happens, and maybe you've experienced this firsthand, is that a certain diet may provide results in the short term, but over time, especially after returning to their former way of eating, a person often regains the weight they lost while on that diet, and sometimes they gain extra. As a result, that person might try dieting again, potentially followed by additional weight gain or regain, creating a vicious cycle. And this cycle, often called yo-yo dieting, is understandably incredibly deflating, discouraging, and disempowering. Instead of dieting, I advocate building a way of eating that is enjoyable, sustainable, and healthy for the long term. Henceforth, if and when I use the word diet here, I mean dietary pattern, something that can be maintained over the course of one's life. Not a short-term, extreme intervention, but a pattern with lots of room for diversity and abundance, not something characterized by exclusion. So let's dive into how plant-based eating can support a healthy body weight. First up, let's discuss how weight loss is achieved. To understand how weight loss occurs, we need to understand something called energy balance. Put simply, if your body utilizes the same amount of energy as you consume, you will maintain a stable weight. If you consume more than what your body needs and you don't end up utilizing the extra, your body will store the excess energy. This results in weight gain. In order to lose weight, your body needs to be in an energy deficit. This means utilizing more energy than you consume. So again, weight maintenance comes through a balance between energy intake and requirement. Weight gain occurs due to an energy surplus, and weight loss occurs due to an energy deficit. So using the terminology of energy balance, how does eating a plant-based dietary pattern promote being in an energy deficit? While being in an energy deficit is not inherent to eating plant-based, it can be easier to achieve than through other means because eating plant-based promotes satiety on a smaller amount of energy or calories. There are a few primary reasons for this, and I'll get into each of these in more detail. As a shorthand, I'll call these calorie density, water, bulk, fiber, chewing, and plant protein. First, let's talk about calorie density. The concept of calorie density refers to how much energy is in a given food by weight. The lower a food's calorie density, the more volume of food a person can consume without over-consuming calories. On the other hand, the higher a food's calorie density, typically the easier it is to overconsume energy through that food. So when we're talking about achieving an energy deficit with the goal of losing weight, the idea of calorie density is a great tool to have in your toolbox. For our purposes, we'll calculate calorie density by how many calories are in 100 grams of a given food. So you can think of a food as being of low calorie density if it is 0 to 99 calories per 100 grams. Medium calorie density is 100 to 299 calories per 100 grams of the food. High calorie density is 300 to 699 calories per 100 gram, and very high is 700 plus calories per 100 grams. Now, you don't need to remember all of that. It's more of a rule of thumb. Some examples of food with a low calorie density include nearly all fresh fruits and vegetables, and even some legume products such as green peas, silken tofu, and plant-based milks. Fill up your plate with lots of these foods. By the way, I get these examples from a terrific chart in Simon Hill's book, The Proof is in the Plants. See the show notes for page numbers and a link to the book. Some examples of medium or moderate calorie density include most legumes and whole grains. So think beans, lentils, chickpeas, oats, wheat, rice, barley, and more, as well as a few higher energy fruits such as avocados and dates. As a rule of thumb, eat some of these foods alongside having the bulk of your foods from a low calorie density if weight loss is your goal. Finally, some examples of foods with a high calorie density include nuts and seeds, dried fruit, and typically foods with a bit more processing, less water, and added fat and sugar, such as granola. Limit these foods. You don't have to avoid them entirely, especially because they are both health promoting and tasty, but because of the large amount of energy they contain, you'll want to be judicious with your consumption of them. In other words, don't eat handfuls of nuts as if they were popcorn or blueberries, but you may certainly top your salad or pasta with some chopped nuts, etc. And then lastly, very high calorie density encompasses things like cooking oils. So just to note that. One reason it's helpful to have such categories is in being able to lump various ingredients into buckets for visualizing what to emphasize, what to eat a moderate amount of, and what to limit or avoid, again, if weight loss is the goal. To bring plant-based eating back into focus, how are calorie density and plant-based eating related? Well, if you haven't yet considered this fact, most of the foods that are of a low calorie density are plants. Many animal products fall into the medium or high calorie density categories. When you fill up your plate with a variety of delicious, whole, and minimally processed plant foods, it's easier to stick in the low and medium calorie densities. Next, let's consider the water content of food. This is actually a piece of the calorie density puzzle. Think about foods in the low calorie density bucket. Most of them have a high water content. This is primarily what enables them to have such a low energy content compared to their weight. On the flip side, foods that are high in caloric density have very little water. Consider some of the items high in caloric density: nuts, nut butters, and dried fruit. They have a low water content compared to other foods in the low and medium categories, and thus their calories are more concentrated on a per gram basis. To illustrate this concept of a food's water content, think about eating a cereal bowl full of strawberries or carrots versus one full of potato chips. How full would you feel after chewing and swallowing all of that whole fruit or veg compared to the potato chips? most of us would hardly notice eating the potato chips. We might even look down after a minute or two and wonder where they had all gone. And we probably know that feeling, right? But after eating the strawberries or carrots, we'd likely feel a difference in hunger level. This concept of water content also shows that not all plant-based foods are created equal. While all of these foods are plant-based, the strawberries and carrots are far better for promoting weight loss as their water content makes them more filling. Strawberries are 91.3% water. Carrots are 89.2% water. Potato chips are just shy of a measly 2% water. And let's not allow this to lead us to demonize potatoes in any way, by the way. A baked potato is 75.9% water. Potato chips are mostly oil and salt. The crispy potato slice is just a carrier. Also, to add in caloric measurements for further illustration, 100 grams of raw strawberries contains only 32 calories, 100 grams of carrots contains 41 calories, and 100 grams of potato chips contains more than 10 times those at 532 calories. To be fair, dry roasted cashews, for example, have a similar water content to potato chips, and I would highly advocate eating cashews over potato chips as far as health is concerned. So water content isn't everything, but when it comes to understanding the role that water plays in satiety, I think this example paints a helpful picture. Plus, the comparison of nuts with potato chips is helpful in reminding us that nuts, while part of a healthy diet, are calorie dense, and that it is important to be mindful of not over-consuming them if your goal is weight loss. So back to summarizing the benefits of eating whole and minimally processed plant foods for supporting healthy and sustainable weight loss. There is a tremendous variety of foods with a high water content that are therefore low to moderate in their calorie density and are terrific to enjoy and fill up on. Next, I want to talk about the idea of bulk. By bulk, I mean the amount of food we eat. This builds on the former point. Due to their greater water content, foods with a low calorie density, and to a decent extent, foods with a medium calorie density, add bulk to your plate. This means you will have more to chew, more to consume, and this fills your stomach, promoting satiety or a feeling of fullness or satisfaction. When we eat foods that have little water and a high calorie density, it doesn't take much bulk to hit a certain threshold of energy intake. Conversely, if we fill our plates with low and medium calorie dense foods that have high water content, there will be a lot more bulk to consume to get us to a similar threshold of energy intake. This means that you won't have to feel like you're depriving yourself. As I said at the top of the episode, this is not about dieting. It's about finding a way of eating that is sustainable, and that includes it being enjoyable. By adding a good amount of bulk to your plate through foods of low calorie density and high water content, alongside an appropriate amount of medium density foods like legumes and whole grains, you can promote enjoyment and satisfaction without overconsumption. Speaking of satisfaction, let's discuss fiber. If you've paid any attention to nutrition advice, you've likely come across the importance of fiber for our health. And this has especially been a focus in recent years, as research on the gut and the microbiome has exploded. We've continued to gain further understanding of its importance for our health. Let's get one thing clear right away. Only plants contain fiber. We're talking about dietary fiber here. Sometimes I wonder if people think that meat contains fiber because of the notion of muscle fibers, but let's straighten that out right now. Animal products contain no fiber. Only plants contain fiber. So how does fiber relate to achieving and maintaining a healthy weight? One way fiber promotes satiety and is related to weight loss is that fiber delays gastric emptying. This means food stays in our stomachs for longer, helping us to feel satisfied by our meals for longer, and thus delaying the onset of hunger. This means less snacking, less overall energy consumption, and an easier time achieving a calorie deficit and thus weight loss. While all plants contain some fiber, low and medium calorie density foods that are high in fiber include beans, lentils, peas, berries, oats and other whole grains, pears, and more. One key aspect of the relationship between fiber and gut health is diversity. So while these foods are highlighted for their high fiber content, overall, focus on eating a diversity of whole and minimally processed plant foods. Yet another facet related to satiety is chewing. This relates back to our point about bulk. The more food you have in front of you to eat, unless it's a smoothie or a blended soup, the more chewing you will need to do in order to consume it. The act of chewing itself promotes satiety by slowing us down as we eat. And on that note, you can kind of chew a smoothie and a soup, just move it around in your mouth a bit. Anyway, you've likely heard that it takes our brain a little while to register that we've actually had enough to eat. If we scarf down our food in 5 to 10 minutes, it's very easy to overconsume. But when we take our time to chew, and when we have food that requires more chewing, we slow down and are better able to pay attention to how much food we're actually consuming. And there are numerous other benefits to chewing our food as well. So I advise us all to be more thoughtful about chewing, regardless of our weight goals. If you've ever eaten a really big salad, like a huge salad that was your main meal, you'll know how it can almost feel like work to make it through the whole thing. There's a lot to chew. But I don't mean that to sound like a bad thing. Again, this slows us down. Rather than inhaling a hamburger or some chicken nuggets in just a few minutes, a large plate or bowl of foods high in their water content and bulk gives our body time to register what and how much we're consuming. And whole and minimally processed plant foods are terrific at leading the way in this regard. Finally, let's talk a bit about plant protein. Of all the macronutrients, so carbohydrates, fats, and protein, and we could also include alcohol in there, protein is the most satiating. In other words, it's the best at making you feel satisfied or full. Protein is satiating regardless of source, so animal protein is satiating as well as plant protein. But animal products often come along with components it's best to limit in our diets, such as saturated fat, dietary cholesterol, heme iron, and more. On the other hand, plant protein comes along with lots of good things. One of those is fiber, which we just talked about, and animal products contain no fiber. Plant proteins also bring along phytonutrients, powerful bioactive components such as polyphenols, like anthocyanins and catechins, among numerous others, that have positive health outcomes. By the way, the prefix phyto in phytonutrients is Greek for plant. So like fiber, these powerful beneficial nutrients are only found in plants. Okay, to sum up what we've discussed, while eating plant-based doesn't guarantee weight loss, there are several reasons why a plant-based dietary pattern can help promote weight loss and or the maintenance of a healthy body weight. When we focus on eating mostly or entirely whole and minimally processed plant foods, we encounter benefits such as the ease of filling up our plates, remember bulk, filling up our plates with foods that have a low or medium calorie density and high water content, which makes it easier to achieve a calorie deficit, and the further promotion of satiety through fiber, chewing, and the consumption of plant protein. I hope that you found this episode interesting and informative. Please share it around if you think it's valuable information. If you or someone you know has been toying with the idea of eating more plants, perhaps this provides the push needed to dive in and give it a shot. If you have questions or want to suggest a topic for a future episode, I would love to hear from you. Send an email to edenandme@substack.com. Also, if you've been enjoying this podcast, please consider leaving a review. I'd love to grow the reach of the podcast here in 2025, and I need your help to do so. Thank you in advance. If you want recipes, head over to edenandme.com, where you can find a variety of delicious recipes to bring what you're learning into the kitchen. Finally, become an email subscriber on Substack to have new podcast episodes delivered right to your inbox. If you appreciate the work I'm doing and want to support the show, you'll also have the option of becoming a paid subscriber. That's all for now, friends. Until next time, be well. Thanks for listening to Eating for Eden. If you found this episode informative or inspiring, please consider sharing it with a friend. Climate change is an issue we all need to tackle together, So let's invite others to journey along with us as we continue the conversation and start taking action. Until next week, friends, take care.